"Is that your real toolkit?" the CEO asked, stopping the entire warehouse tour. Her biggest client turned around. So did the investors. I looked down at the scratched plastic case in my hand, the one my dead wife bought for $9 after I sold my real tools to pay her hospital bills. Before I could answer, the CEO laughed and said, "That thing belongs in a child's lunchbox, not beside a billion-dollar insulin shipment." A few people smiled. Then the CEO looked at my work coat, my cheap boots, and the peeling reminder sticker inside the lid that said, "Count Noah's insulin pens Friday." She said, "We sell precision here, not poor dad panic with gas station tools." Nobody defended me. Not the engineers, not the warehouse crew, not the client whose medicine was sitting behind that wall. I swallowed it because my son needed his next refill more than I needed my pride. The sensor panel was still blinking red beside my knee, so I opened the toolkit anyway. Security stood close, like my cheap pliers were dangerous. The visible fault was easy: loose terminal, cold contraction, bad contact. I fixed it with a tiny flathead and a strip of wire while the COO muttered something about liability theater. The ending of this story changed everything. Before we get there, take a quick second to join the community by hitting subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. The panel stopped blinking and the green light came back on just in time for the tour to continue. But under that clean green signal, I felt the deeper pulse through the conduit. A 3-beat hesitation from the old manual override line behind the wall. I knew that rhythm. I had warned them about it twice. "There's a bigger issue," I said, still on one knee. "That relay isn't reporting clean." The COO's face hardened. "Stop creating drama. Cheap men always make cheap problems sound expensive." People chuckled because it was easier than listening. The CEO turned away with the client, already pretending the moment was over. But behind them sat North Star's insulin shipment, stacked in white cold crates worth more than the building I lived in, and all anyone remembered was laughing at my $9 toolkit. By noon, my toolkit had become a company meme. Somebody clipped Madeline's line from the warehouse tour, added a little cartoon rattle beside my hand, and sent it through Meridian's internal chat with the caption, "Precision not included." I saw warehouse workers laugh at their phones, then look up and pretend they hadn't. I did not blame all of them. In places like Meridian, laughing at the poor man was safer than disagreeing with the people who signed your schedule. Victor made sure the joke had paperwork behind it. By lunch, Ben found me near the compressor cage and said, "They're adding unauthorized alarm escalation to your file." He kept his voice low, eyes on the camera above us. "Victor's telling people you tried to sabotage the North Star tour for attention." I opened the old service logs anyway, fingers stiff from the cold, and searched the manual override warnings. There they were, month after month, marked resolved, with no repair notes, no parts installed, no technician signature that made sense. A failure hidden under green check marks. Tara Bishop from Client Relations caught me copying numbers onto my glove cuff. "Caleb," she said, "do not mention this to North Star. Client confidence is part of the product." I looked at her tablet, clean and bright, then back at the old valve history nobody upstairs wanted to read. Medicine staying cold should be part of it too. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. Noah's school nurse. Blood sugar drop. I left through the loading dock with shame sitting heavy in my coat, because I was always choosing which emergency got my body first. At home, Noah was pale but sitting up, pretending the juice box in his hand was no big deal. Later, he saw the clip on somebody's repost before I could stop him. "Why do people with expensive shoes get to laugh at you?" he asked. I had no answer that would not poison him. After he fell asleep, I opened the toolkit to tighten the loose hinge and found the foam peeling near the bottom. Under it was Mara's old note, folded small, her handwriting faded but clear. Small tools still count when big people stop listening. I went back after hours because old machines tell the truth better when executives are gone. The warehouse lights were dimmed, the North Star crates sat behind frosted doors, and the only sound in the records room was the scanner clicking above my head. I pulled the mechanical binders Victor's team never opened anymore, the ones with handwritten valve maps and coffee stains from men who knew cold rooms by touch. Zone C7 kept showing up beside the same old manual override line I had felt pulsing through the wall. Then I saw the routing sheet, and my stomach went tight. North Star's biggest insulin shipment, the one everyone upstairs kept calling the renewal anchor, was sitting in a cold zone controlled by that same failing valve system. On the dashboard, everything was green. Perfect numbers, clean little boxes. But the old valve did not report failure cleanly. It could stick halfway and still send back a lie. Ben slipped in through the side door with his hood up and handed me his phone. "Parts were ordered," he whispered. The photo showed replacement valves tagged 3 months earlier, still sitting wrapped on a storage pallet because nobody had approved the labor hours. I was zooming in when the records room door opened. Victor stood there with 2 security guards, smiling like he had been waiting for me to become useful to his story. "Stealing proprietary client data now?" he said. I held up the routing sheet. "This shipment may be at risk." His smile vanished. "You contact North Star, I fire you and call police. You understand me?" By morning, Madeline had Victor's version before mine could reach her. I was unstable, humiliated, trying to weaponize fear because a room full of people laughed at my tools. I went home with my badge still in my pocket and no idea how long it would work. Noah's insulin pen sat in our refrigerator door, lined up behind a carton of milk and a jar of pickles. Small and ordinary and dependent on rooms exactly like the one Meridian was gambling with. Families like mine never saw the warehouse, never met the CEO, never knew whose shortcut could reach their kitchen. I picked up my phone to call Dr. Elaine Porter at North Star. Before I could press her number, an email from Meridian hit my screen. "Suspended pending review, client interference risk." I walked into North Star's temporary inspection office with my $9 toolkit in one hand and copied warning logs tucked inside my coat. I did not come loud. I did not come looking for a scene. I came because somewhere beyond those frosted warehouse doors sat enough insulin to keep thousands of kitchen refrigerators stocked for families who would never know my name. Victor and Tara got there before me. By the time I reached the lobby, 2 security guards were already waiting, and Victor had his hand raised like he was stopping traffic. "That man is suspended," he told them. "He is attempting to steal proprietary client information." North Star executives turned from the coffee station. Meridian staff froze near the glass doors. I felt every eye land on my toolkit, my work coat, my cheap boots, like poverty itself was evidence. Madeline stepped out of the conference room, face tight with embarrassment more than concern. "Caleb," she said, low enough to sound controlled but loud enough to cut. "Using sick people and your son's condition to make yourself important is beneath even this." That one almost got through my teeth. I thought of Noah's insulin in our refrigerator door. I thought of Mara's note folded under cheap foam. I opened the folder instead of my mouth and turned toward Dr. Elaine Porter. "Please," I said, "look at the old valve records before you sign anything." Victor moved to block me, but Dr. Porter lifted one hand. She was not warm, but she knew the difference between drama and documentation. I showed her the repeated manual override warnings, the missing repair signatures, the replacement valves ordered and never installed, and the dashboard readings that stayed green even when the mechanical line had already started lying. She read without blinking. Then she looked at Madeline. "North Star will delay renewal until Meridian verifies the manual backup system in Zone C7. The room shifted. Victor pulled Madeline aside near the frosted glass, but his whisper carried enough for me to catch pieces. Quarter collapse, board confidence, CEO seat. Tara stood a few feet away, staring at my hands as I placed Mara's note back under the toolkit foam. I saw her understand, just for a second, that they had not mocked plastic and metal. They had mocked the last thing my wife left, telling me I still mattered. Security escorted me out after that, but Dr. Porter kept the logs, and for the first time, Meridian's clean story had a crack big enough for the cold truth to breathe through. Noah was waiting at the kitchen table when I got home, his glucose monitor beside his elbow and a juice box straw bent flat between his fingers. "I'm fine," he said before I asked, which meant he had scared himself earlier and did not want to scare me too. Mrs. Delgado had left chicken soup on the stove and a note saying she would check in tomorrow, but there was a certified letter on the counter with Meridian's logo at the top. I did not open it right away. Noah slid his sketchbook toward me instead. He had drawn my $9 toolkit as a shield around little white insulin boxes, with cold air coming off them like clouds. It made me proud in a way that hurt, because no kid should have to turn his father's humiliation into armor. "Dad," he asked, quiet, "is medicine only safe when rich people are watching?" I sat down across from him and tried to find an answer that would not put poison in his chest. I wanted to say sometimes rich people only protect what can embarrass them. I wanted to say poor families live inside other people's shortcuts. Instead, I touched the corner of his drawing and said, "Medicine should be safe because people matter, not because somebody important is standing there." He looked at the fridge. We both knew how many pens were left. Suspension meant no overtime, no steady check, and the next refill was already waiting like a bill with teeth. Mrs. Delgado knocked once and opened the door enough to say the certified letter had come while I was gone. Meridian was warning me to stop contacting clients, preserve company property, and prepare for further action. That night, after Noah went to bed, I sat with the letter on one side and the toolkit on the other. For a minute, I thought about signing whatever silence paper Madeline put in front of me if it kept my son's medicine paid for. Then I opened the case and read Mara's note again. She had bought that cheap little kit when she knew I had sold everything better. Small tools still count when big people stop listening. I folded it back under the foam and understood the toolkit could not become the thing that bought my silence. It had to become proof that small hands still protect lives. Madeline summoned me back to Meridian through a calendar invite, like humiliation could be scheduled in 30-minute blocks. The conference room was small, glass on 3 sides, with Victor already sitting there and a legal folder placed neatly in front of the empty chair. Madeline did not offer coffee. She slid the agreement across the table and said, "This is a severance package, more generous than your position requires." The number on the first page made my hand tighten around the pen before I could stop it. It would cover 3 months of rent, Noah's insulin refill, the overdue electric bill, and the debt collector who kept calling during dinner. Victor leaned back, smiling like he had personally invented kindness. "This is mercy, Caleb. Men in your position should be grateful when powerful people let them leave quietly." I turned the pages slowly. The agreement required me to surrender all copied logs, notes, photographs, unauthorized technical materials, and then I saw it written plain. My toolkit, too. Company property, they called anything used in connection with Meridian systems. My cheap little case, Mara's note, the last thing she bought me after I had sold the good tools to keep our family breathing a little longer. I nearly signed anyway. That is the part I am not proud of. Pride does not pay for insulin. Dignity does not keep a child's glucose from dropping at 2 in the morning. But near the back, under confidentiality, was the clause that finally pushed the pen out of my hand. I would be forbidden from discussing the manual valve system with any client, regulator, employee, contractor, or third party. Not just the logs, not just North Star, the danger itself. I set the pen down. "No." Madeline's eyes narrowed. "Think carefully." I looked at her across that polished table. Money can pay my rent. It can't keep insulin cold if Meridian keeps lying about the room it sits in. Victor laughed once, sharp and ugly, but Madeline's face changed into something harder. "You're turning poverty into a moral costume," she said. I stood and picked up my toolkit before anyone could touch it. "No," I said. "You're turning risk into a business model." I left with nothing signed. Behind me, Madeline finally opened the copies Dr. Porter had kept and saw my warnings matched a buried risk memo Victor had never shown her. Madeline found the memo because Victor got careless and I got loud enough to make silence expensive. It was 8 months old, buried in an internal archive under a harmless title, Legacy Manual Valve Load Response Review, the kind of name meant to put people to sleep before they understood it was warning them. The memo said the older manual valves could stick under storm load pressure, report false stability to the dashboard, and leave cold zones warming while the system still showed green. It had signatures from operations, client relations, and Victor's office. The replacement plan had been deferred until after North Star renewal, with one note written in corporate language so clean it almost hid the sin. Avoid unnecessary margin disruption during contract cycle. Tara was the first one to crack. Madeline called her in and asked why North Star never saw the warning. Tara stared at the floor and said the reports had been softened so the client would not demand costly repairs before signing. Victor did not even look ashamed. "Failure probability was low," he said. "Insurance coverage existed. Every system carries risk." Madeline looked at him like she was hearing the company speak without makeup for the first time. My cheap tool panic, the thing she had mocked in front of clients, now had Meridian's own proof stamped under it. That same afternoon, an anonymous envelope slid under Mrs. Delgado's door while she was watching Noah. Inside was a copy of the memo, no note, no name, just the pages folded around a truth somebody inside Meridian had finally refused to hold alone. I read it at my kitchen table with Noah's insulin box sitting in the fridge behind me, humming like a small prayer. Then Ben called, voice low and shaken. "They cut my system access," he said. "I can't pull service histories anymore." He tried to make it sound like nothing, but I knew what it meant. They were not only punishing me. They were teaching every young tech what happened when you helped the wrong poor man tell the truth. My phone rang again before I could answer him. Dr. Elaine Porter's name lit up the screen. When I picked up, she did not waste a word. "Mr. Turner, is North Star's insulin shipment safe tonight?" Rain tapped the window. The weather alert on my phone had turned red. I looked at Mara's note inside the open toolkit and told her the only answer I could live with. Not if the storm hits before they replace what they already know is broken. The storm hit before Meridian finished deciding what version of the truth was safest to admit. Ice wrapped the power lines, traffic lights went black across the west side, and the warehouse alarms started talking to each other in broken pieces. I was at home checking Noah's numbers when my phone lit up with Dr. Porter's call. Behind her voice I could hear shouting, fans surging, somebody reading temperatures too fast. "The insulin zone is warming unevenly," she said. "Your dashboard is still green, but my floor sensors are climbing." That told me everything. The old valve was lying exactly the way the memo said it would. I looked at Noah sitting on the couch with his blanket pulled to his chin, trying not to look scared. Mrs. Delgado was already at the door in slippers and a winter coat, because that woman could hear trouble through walls. "Go," she said. "I've got him." I kissed Noah's forehead and promised I would be back before morning. He looked at the toolkit in my hand and said, "Don't let them throw it away." I drove through freezing rain with the heater coughing and Mara's note tucked under the foam beside the tiny wrench. By the time I reached North Star, security tried to block me at the gate. "He's suspended," one guard said into his radio. Dr. Porter came through the glass doors herself, coat open, badge swinging. "That medicine is moving toward discard temperature," she said. "He comes in." Inside, Victor was already telling staff to blame the storm and avoid any mention of legacy valves. Madeline stood near a wall of screens showing beautiful green lies. I did not stop for either of them. I went straight into the manual override room, where the air smelled like frost, rust, and electrical heat. The old valve was jammed halfway, just like I had warned, its handle stiff under my glove. I put the cheap screwdriver against the pipe, pressed my ear close, and listened for the pulse. Madeline followed me in and saw it then. Her $1,000,000 dashboards failing, while the man she mocked heard the truth through a $9 toolkit. I freed the first valve with a wire loop and a slow turn, and zone C7 began dropping back toward safety. Then the second valve locked hard enough to bend the bit in my hand, and behind that door sat the biggest insulin shipment Northstar had ever trusted Meridian to protect. The second valve fought me like it had been waiting years for somebody to need it. I spent the night in those freezing mechanical corridors with my knees on wet concrete, fingers going numb inside my gloves, listening to pipes while Meridian's software kept misreading the room in clean green numbers. Temperatures climbed in waves, not all at once, which made it worse. One rack would steady while another started drifting toward discard range. Northstar executives crowded behind Dr. Porter, silent now, watching their $1 billion shipment depend on a man their vendor had called unstable. Meridian engineers stood with tablets in their hands, embarrassed by how little the screens knew. Warehouse workers watched from the doorway because they understood old systems better than boardrooms ever had. Madeline stayed near the panel, coat buttoned tight, saying almost nothing while I used the bent flathead to hold a bracket, the tiny wrench to loosen a frozen lock nut, the wire loop to guide a stuck spring back into place, and the custom-filed bit I made years ago for a discontinued valve nobody had ordered tooling for anymore. Victor tried to push in twice. "Unauthorized manual repair creates liability," he snapped, like paperwork mattered more than warming medicine. Dr. Porter turned on him so sharply the room went still. "Lost medicine creates patients without treatment," she said. "Move." I explained every step to Northstar's engineers before I made it, because I did not want anyone trusting me like magic. "Check that gauge, watch the return line. If this drops too fast, shut me down." My hands shook, but the process held. One pallet stabilized 4 minutes before discard temperature. "Doctor." Porter looked at the numbers, then at the rows of white crates, and said quietly, "Thousands of families will never know they were almost failed tonight." That sentence hit me harder than the cold. I thought of Noah's fridge, of parents counting pens, of kids pretending not to be scared so their fathers could breathe. When I reached into the toolkit for the filed bit, Mara's note had slipped loose under the foam. I pressed it back with my thumb, but not before Madeline saw the faded handwriting and the way my hand would not stop shaking. Behind us, Tara stood near the service doorway with her phone low against her folder, recording Victor as he told a supervisor, "Do not document legacy defect. Storm anomaly only. No written admission." By dawn, the cold rooms were steady. Northstar's shipment was safe. Men who had ignored me all week would not meet my eyes. Dr. Porter closed her tablet and told Madeline the renewal was suspended pending full investigation. The warehouse fans kept running, and for once, their sound felt less like machinery than testimony. Meridian tried to rename the fix before my hands even got warm. I was sitting on an overturned crate near the loading dock, blowing into my gloves while the feeling crawled back into my fingers, when Tara showed me the draft statement on her phone. Meridian Coldworks successfully demonstrated platform resilience during an abnormal weather event through coordinated field response. Coordinated field response. That was what they called a suspended man crawling through freezing service corridors with a thrift store toolkit while their dashboards lied in green. My name was nowhere in it. Neither was the valve. Neither was the memo. Neither was the fact that Northstar's insulin had sat minutes from becoming expensive trash, while Victor told people not to write down the reason. Madeline had allowed the softer language at first. I saw her through the glass conference room, standing with PR and legal, her face pale but still controlled. The truth would hit valuation, client trust, her board, maybe her chair. It is easy to tell the truth when it costs nothing, harder when it starts sending men in suits toward your office. Then Ben came out and said HR still had my termination file open for unauthorized client access. I almost laughed because my body was too tired to do anything else. I had saved the shipment, and they were still trying to make me the broken part. Tara followed me into the hallway a few minutes later and slipped her phone into my hand.
"Don't say I gave this to you," she whispered.
The recording was short but clear. Victor's voice telling a supervisor, "Do not document legacy defect. Storm anomaly only. No written admission." I drove home with that voice playing in my head louder than the ice hitting my windshield. Noah was awake when I got there, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, watching the Meridian statement crawl across a local business page. He looked at me, then at the toolkit on the floor by my boots. "They laughed at it," he said. "Then they stole what it did?" That did something ugly inside me. I opened my laptop and almost uploaded everything right there. The memo, the logs, Tara's recording, every piece that could burn Meridian down before they buried me first. But lawsuits do not care how right a broke father is. Before I hit send, Dr. Porter called. "There will be a formal client safety review," she said. "Testify there. They cannot edit your name out of a sworn room." Across town, Madeline still had time to choose. Protect the brand story, or say North Star was saved by the single dad she humiliated. The safety review looked more like a trial than a meeting. North Star executives filled the front row with printed temperature charts on their laps. Regulators sat along the side wall. Meridian leadership kept close to the lawyers. Warehouse workers stood in the back because nobody had saved them chairs, even though half of them knew those cold rooms better than the people being paid to explain them. Media cameras faced the long table where Victor sat with his polished timeline, and I sat near the back with my $9 toolkit under my chair, one hand resting on the handle like it might get taken if I stopped touching it. Victor spoke first, clean and confident. Under abnormal storm conditions, Meridian's platform performed with resilience. Our field response team executed emergency stabilization. He said it like nobody in that room had spent the night watching green numbers lie while insulin warmed behind steel doors. Dr. Porter interrupted before he could move to the next slide. Who physically stabilized the shipment when the automated platform failed? Victor blinked. As I said, our field response. No, she said. Name the person. The room turned toward Madeline. She sat very still, hands folded on the table, with every version of her future waiting in that silence. She could repeat the lie and keep me small. She could protect the statement, the valuation, the board, the story where rich systems save poor families without ever needing poor hands. I expected blame. I had learned to expect it early. Then Tara stood, pale but steady, and handed her phone to the regulator. "There is a recording," she said. Victor's face went flat. The audio played through the room. "Do not document legacy defect. Storm anomaly only. No written admission." After that, Ben testified that replacement valves had been ordered 3 months earlier and never installed because operations cut the job. He held up the parts photo with shaking fingers, and I saw warehouse workers nod behind him, not happy, just relieved that truth had finally found a microphone. Dr. Porter asked again, quieter this time. "Ms. Cross, who identified and repaired the failure North Star was not told about?" Madeline looked at Victor, then at the toolkit under my chair, then at me. "Caleb Turner," she said. My name sounded strange in her mouth, stripped of joke and suspicion. "Mr. Turner identified a known legacy valve failure Meridian leadership ignored. He manually stabilized North Star's insulin shipment when our platform did not." No one clapped. Truth that late does not deserve applause. But it landed. It protected my name and detonated everything else. Meridian's lawyers started whispering fast. Victor pushed back from the table. Madeline's board seat, her CEO title, the contract, the company's clean reliability story, All of it began cracking in public because North Star had made her say the poor man's name out loud. Graham Vale called the emergency board meeting before the safety review microphones were even packed away. By 3 o'clock, Meridian's top floor was full of men and women saying the word exposure like it was the worst thing in the world, worse than a warming insulin shipment, worse than hidden memos, worse than families who would have opened refrigerator doors and found nothing useful because somebody protected a quarter. Madeline sat at the end of the table while Graham told her she had endangered the company with an uncontrolled admission. Victor jumped in fast, wounded now but still dangerous. Caleb Turner violated suspension orders, he said. He accessed client infrastructure without authorization. The repair happened to work, but the liability belongs to the rogue mechanic who touched the system. Rogue mechanic. That was the new shape of me. Not unstable anymore, not a thief. Now I was the broken part they could point at after using my hands to save their biggest client. The board started discussing a statement that would praise Meridian's response, regret procedural deviations, and shift the risk onto my unauthorized actions. Then Graham placed a pen in front of Madeline and offered her the trade plainly. Sign it, keep her position, stabilize investors. Refuse, and the board would begin removal by morning. I learned about it from the legal voicemail that hit my phone while Noah and I were eating canned soup at our little kitchen table. Meridian demanded immediate surrender of all company-related materials, including copied notes, emergency checklists, specialty tools, and the custom valve bit used at North Star. Noah stopped eating. "Can they take it?" he asked. His eyes went to the toolkit by the door. "Can they take the last thing Mom gave you?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out. That was the closest I came to breaking. Not when they laughed. Not when they called me a thief. Right there, with my son staring at a cheap plastic case like it was the only piece of his mother still useful in the world. The fight had reached into our apartment now. It had my rent, my medicine refill, my wife's note, my boy's sleep. Across town, Madeline went back to the warehouse alone. No cameras, no Victor. She found workers in the manual override room using my handwritten emergency checklist taped beside the old panel instead of Meridian's official portal. Ben had copied it before they locked him out. A forklift driver told her, "Portal still says green when the pipe says trouble." Madeline stood there reading my handwriting under fluorescent lights, and I think she finally understood the board's plan. Meridian could survive the truth only by destroying the man whose care had saved it. The public accountability hearing was the first Meridian room where workers got seats before executives did. North Star came with regulators and temperature charts. Patient advocates came with stories about families counting insulin pens at kitchen tables. Warehouse workers, field technicians, media, lawyers, and Meridian leadership filled the rest of the room until the air felt too warm for a company that sold cold. One technician after another stepped up and said the same thing in different ways. Warnings ignored, routes overloaded, repair parts delayed, jobs marked complete because there were not enough paid hours to finish them. A woman from the night crew said she had stopped reporting small valve hesitations because supervisors called them noise. Another tech said he had learned to write monitoring recommended instead of defect found because defect triggered obligations Meridian did not want to pay for. Ben stood with both hands around the microphone and said, "They trained us not to use the word that would make them responsible." North Star staff described the storm night, how executives argued liability while I explained every manual step so their engineers could verify the fix. Tara spoke next, voice thin but clear. "Client reports were polished to protect renewals," she said. "Not medicine." Then the chair asked me to speak. I placed the $9 toolkit on the table, and the small plastic click of it opening sounded louder than it should have. I unfolded Mara's note with fingers that still remembered the cold. "Small tools still count when big people stop listening," I read. Nobody laughed this time. Madeline looked at the toolkit, then at the workers behind me. When she stood, Graham's face tightened before she even spoke. Meridian treated field workers as disposable, she said, while selling their care as corporate reliability. We ignored the people closest to the systems and called that efficiency. Graham leaned toward her, voice low but not low enough. Admitting systemic failure will destroy investor confidence and invite regulatory punishment. Madeline looked at him the way people look at a locked door they have finally stopped fearing. Then maybe confidence was built on the wrong thing, she said. The hearing chair turned to me after that. Mr. Turner, what should justice look like? Every camera shifted, every lawyer lifted a pen. Everyone expected me to ask for Madeline's removal, maximum damages, and enough punishment to make the woman who mocked my tools regret ever saying my name. Reporters started shouting before I had even taken my hand off Mara's note. Should Madeline Cross be fired? One called. Do you want Victor Shaw prosecuted? Another asked. Should Meridian lose every cold chain contract? Someone near the back said, Are you asking regulators to bankrupt them? The room turned toward me with that hungry quiet people get when they want pain to become entertainment. Madeline stood at the front table with nothing left to hide behind. No green dashboards, no PR statement, no CEO distance. Just the woman who had looked down at my $9 toolkit in front of her biggest client and made my poverty part of her presentation. I thought about Noah's insulin lined up behind milk and pickles in our refrigerator. I thought about Mara buying that cheap toolkit when she knew I had sold the good tools to keep our family afloat. I thought about the storm, the warming shipment, Ben losing access, Tara shaking while she told the truth, and all the technicians punished for writing down what machines were already saying. I had the perfect chance to make Madeline small. I could have held up the toolkit and asked her if it still belonged in a toy aisle. I could have made the room laugh at her this time. Instead, I closed the lid and said, I don't want revenge that breaks the people who had no power to lie. The cameras stayed fixed on me. I want full replacement of every legacy valve in critical storage, restitution to North Star, independent safety oversight with regulator and client authority, transparent service logs clients can see, technician protections when they report defects, whistleblower safeguards with real consequences for retaliation. Then I looked at Victor. Every executive who concealed risk, softened reports, threatened workers, or endangered medicine needs to be removed and investigated. That starts with him. Graham's face went hard. Madeline did not look relieved when I turned to her. Good. Relief would have been too easy. She stays only under client, worker, and regulator oversight, I said. Not because she earned comfort, because she told the truth when it cost her power, and limits are how truth survives after cameras leave. I accepted compensation. I accepted restored standing. I asked for a cold chain safety training program in Mara's name, but I refused hush money, and I refused terms that would shut down innocent workers' paychecks just to make my anger feel clean. That toolkit was never about proving cheap tools could beat expensive systems. It was about proving care is only real when it protects people who will never know your name. Meridian replaced the legacy valves first at North Star, then across every critical client facility that still depended on old manual backups nobody upstairs had wanted to budget for. The public tracking system went live a month later, and for the first time, clients could see more than green check marks. They could see parts ordered, parts installed, technician notes, delays, warnings, and who signed off on what. Victor faced investigation, but I did not celebrate when his office went dark. I checked valve tags. I checked service logs. I checked whether field workers were still being punished for writing the word defect when a defect was what they found. Ben was promoted into a protected field safety role, and the first thing he did was teach younger techs how to document trouble without apologizing for noticing it. Madeline changed slower than the dashboards did. She started riding with field crews without cameras, standing in cold rooms with her arms crossed tight at first, then asking better questions. "What does the dashboard miss?" became the sentence workers trusted more than any apology she gave. I accepted the paid role overseeing critical client manual safety systems, but I made it clear in writing that Mara's name would not become a slogan. The program could train technicians, protect medicine, and tell the truth, or it could find another man to put on a brochure. At the dedication of the Mara Turner Cold Chain Safety Lab, Noah stood beside me in a shirt Mrs. Delgado had ironed twice. He looked at the glass display where the $9 toolkit sat open beside his mother's note, my emergency checklist, and a list of warehouse workers, technicians, and drivers who kept the shipment safe that night. His fingers touched the glass near her handwriting. "She'd like that they kept the spelling exactly how she wrote it," he said, and I had to look down for a second. Later, Madeline found me in the manual override room, where the new valves hummed steady behind clean labels. "I mocked your tools," she said, "because I was afraid reliability depended on people I never learned to respect." I did not tell her it was okay. It had not been. But I nodded because at least she had stopped asking the truth to make her comfortable. North Star installed the display near the insulin cold room, not in the lobby, not under donor lights, but where workers passed it on their rounds. I stood outside that room one evening, watching the temperature hold steady around medicine families would never know almost disappeared, and I understood Meridian had not been stunned by my cheap toolkit. It had been stunned by the truth that the people they looked down on had been holding everything together.